I stood on the porch of my ranch, boots covered in red dust, staring at the giant black truck sinking deeper into the mud. My old tractor was still attached to it by a thick iron chain, the tires hissing steam from the effort it took to drag the beast halfway across the field. The HOA cop's truck was now buried axle deep in wet earth, completely stuck. The man himself, Officer Hank, the so-called HOA enforcer, was screaming at the top of his lungs, waving a citation book in one hand like it could scare a bull. "You've made a big mistake, James," he shouted. "A very big one." I didn't say a word. I just stepped off the porch slowly, arms crossed, letting the silence do the talking. The whole neighborhood was watching now. Some were pretending to water their lawns. Others peered through windows. One even filmed from behind a mailbox. Hank's face was bright red, and for the first time, he looked scared. Not because I was violent, I'm not, but because he realized something. He messed with the wrong ranch. And just like that, the siren started howling in the distance. Now you're probably wondering, how in the world did we end up here? How did a peaceful man like me who just wanted to raise cattle and mind his business end up dragging a so-called HOA officer's truck into a pit of mud? Let me take you back. It all started about 6 weeks earlier. My name's James Walker. I'm 48 years old, born and raised in Texas, though I moved to this part of Colorado to get away from noise, chaos, and rules made by people who never step out of their air-conditioned offices. I bought this ranch with my life savings. 30 acres of quiet land just outside the edge of a new fancy HOA neighborhood called Whispering Pines. The name sounded peaceful, but the people who ran that place? Not so much. I've got 2 horses, a dozen cows, a rescue dog named Bear, and a daughter named Ellie who visits on weekends. Life was calm, until the HOA decided it wasn't. See, my ranch borders the HOA neighborhood, but I'm not part of their association. I bought the land fair and square before they even existed, but that didn't stop them from trying to control me. And leading their little army was none other than Officer Hank, a retired mall cop turned self-appointed HOA enforcer. He had a shiny black truck with HOA plates, a belt full of gadgets, and an ego the size of Texas. The first time I met him, he showed up uninvited and slapped a note on my gate that read, "You are in violation of HOA landscaping guidelines. Cut your grass to 4 inches or less." I nearly laughed. I called him right away and told him straight up, "Sir, this is private property. I'm not under HOA rules." "You're adjacent," he barked, like that gave him the right. "I'm not under anything," I replied, "and I'll thank you to stay off my land." But Hank didn't listen. The next week, I caught his truck parked right on my land again, just beyond the gravel road that separates my ranch from the community entrance. He was sitting inside, taking photos with a big lens camera like he was filming for some wildlife show. I walked up to him and knocked on the window. He rolled it down slow. "Something wrong?" "You're on private property," I said calmly. "You need to move your truck." "I'm just patrolling the area," he said, acting smug. "Making sure there's no suspicious activity." "This is my ranch," I said again. "You don't patrol here." "Then maybe it's time you joined the HOA," he smirked, "so we can fix all these little problems." He finally left. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I saw him 3 more times, always parked in the same spot, always pretending like he had some right to be there. One afternoon, I got home and found him walking around my barn, inspecting it like it was his job. That's when I knew this wasn't going to stop on its own. I called the sheriff. Sheriff Daniels is a no-nonsense guy. He listened carefully and said he'd look into it. But since Hank wasn't doing anything violent, there wasn't much he could do without catching him in the act. So, I installed cameras. Every inch of the east side facing the HOA was now under surveillance. And sure enough, the footage showed him parked there every single day, sometimes for hours. I took the footage to the HOA office in town and demanded to speak to someone. That's when I met Denise, the HOA board president. Blonde, smiley, and sharper than a cactus needle, She pretended to be sweet but kept dodging every direct question. "Oh, Hank is just ensuring safety," she chirped. "You wouldn't believe how much theft goes on these days." "On my ranch?" I asked. "The only person trespassing is your guy." "I'm sorry you feel that way," she smiled. I left with nothing but a headache. So I did what any man with a tractor, a stubborn streak, and an acre of soft mud would do. I waited. The next time Hank parked there, I waited until his lunch break. He always left his truck to walk into the HOA clubhouse, which was just a few steps away from where he illegally parked on my land. I hooked the back of his truck to my tractor with a steel chain I use for hauling logs. It took a little power, but the wheels gave out eventually, and I dragged that monster halfway into the cattle field, right into the muddiest part after the last rain. When he came back, you already know what happened. But what happened next? Let's just say when those sirens hit the edge of my property, things didn't go the way Hank expected. Now, before I tell you what happened when the cops arrived, let me introduce the key people in this story so you understand the battle I was in. There's me, James Walker, a former mechanic, turned rancher, turned reluctant freedom fighter against HOA madness. My daughter Ellie, 16, smart as a whip and loyal to the core. She hates injustice and once said, "If you weren't my dad, I'd still want to fight beside you." Then there's Bear, my 140-pound rescue dog. He's part German Shepherd, part Labrador, and part gentle giant, unless you trespass. Then he turns into a one-dog army. On the other side, we've got Hank, full name Henry Bradford. He used to work mall security in Arizona, but after moving to Whispering Pines, he decided he needed a new mission: policing anyone within spitting distance of the HOA borders. And Denise, sugar on the outside, vinegar on the inside. The HOA board president who thinks everyone who's not inside her gated community is beneath her. As for the rest of the neighbors, well, they were split. Some whispered their support, others acted like I was a ticking bomb. But it didn't matter, because after that day everything changed. Just as the flashing red and blue lights rolled across the dirt road and Hank screamed into his walkie-talkie, something else happened, something even more shocking. A second black truck pulled up behind the cops. Out stepped someone none of us expected to see, and what he said made everyone freeze. The second black truck rolled up slow, tires crunching gravel like a warning. It wasn't marked, but it looked official, polished, strong with government plates. The door opened and out stepped a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark blue jacket with County Commissioner stitched in white on the back. He had silver hair, aviator shades, and the kind of quiet power that made grown men straighten their backs. Hank's mouth fell open. "Commissioner Ray," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. "What are you doing here?" Commissioner Ray didn't answer right away. He looked past Hank at the mud-soaked truck in the middle of my cattle field, then turned to me calmly. "You James Walker?" I nodded. "That's me." He pulled off his shades and tucked them into his shirt. "Mind telling me what's going on here?" Before I could say anything, Hank jumped in. "He towed my vehicle without authorization. That's destruction of property. I want him arrested, immediately." Ray raised a hand. "Quiet, Hank." Just like that, the man fell silent. Commissioner Ray turned back to me. "Start from the top." So I did. I told him everything. The false citations, the trespassing, the truck parked daily on my land, the warning I gave Hank multiple times. I explained how I had footage, timestamps, and even a sheriff's visit on record. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I just told the truth. When I was done, Ray turned to one of the two officers who had arrived in the original police cruiser. "You got that?" he asked. The officer nodded and spoke into his radio, logging every word I'd just said. Ray turned to Hank. "Did you enter Mr. Walker's land?" It's not clearly marked," Hank stammered. "The boundary line." "I have a survey map," I said, pulling a folded document from my back pocket. "And bright orange signs every 20 feet, plus a metal gate. If that's not clear, I don't know what is." Ray took the paper, looked it over, then looked at Hank with a face so cold it could freeze fire. "You parked your HOA vehicle. clearly marked with insignia, on land you knew wasn't part of your jurisdiction. I was doing my job. Hank tried again. Protecting the community. From what? Ray barked. From cows? Everyone went quiet. And then, like it couldn't get any worse for Hank, the second police officer stepped forward holding a tablet. "Sir," he said to Commissioner Ray, "we just pulled security footage from the ranch cameras. There are 17 separate days this month where this truck was parked on the property. Each instance lasted longer than 30 minutes. Ray shook his head, disappointment all over his face. "Effective immediately, Officer Hank Bradford. Your position with Whispering Pines HOA is suspended pending a full investigation." "What?" Hank's voice cracked. You can't do that." "I can and I will," Ray replied. "You're not law enforcement. You're a community officer with no legal authority to step 1 foot off HOA land. What you've done isn't just stupid, it's harassment. And if I see your face on this ranch again, I'll make sure you're arrested myself." Hank stood there trembling, lips moving but no words coming out. Finally, he stormed off, kicking at the mud like a child throwing a tantrum. His boots squelched and sank as he trudged toward his buried truck, fists clenched and face redder than ever. Ray turned back to me. "Mr. Walker, we'll get a tow truck out here to remove this vehicle. You did the right thing by documenting everything. You got guts. Most folks would have let it slide." "I tried," I said quietly. "But I wasn't going to be bullied off my own land." Ray nodded, shook my hand, and said something that stuck with me. "Men who work the land usually have more sense than those who try to rule over it." And with that, he walked away. The tow truck arrived about an hour later. It took nearly 20 minutes just to get the truck out of the mud. Meanwhile, a small crowd from the HOA community gathered near the edge of my property, whispering and watching. A few even clapped softly when Hank's truck was finally hauled off like a fallen beast. I figured it was over, but it wasn't. That night, just after sunset, I noticed something strange. Bear started barking near the gate, loud, frantic. I grabbed my flashlight and walked out, heart racing. As I got closer, I saw it. A note, pinned to my fence with a hunting knife. It was written in bold red marker and said, "This ain't over, cowboy." No signature, no logo. But I didn't need one. I knew it was Hank. The next morning I called Sheriff Daniels again. He came down personally, looked at the knife and the note, and took it seriously. "We'll dust it for prints," he said, "but you need to stay alert. Hank's not exactly stable." "I've dealt with coyotes before," I muttered. "This one just wears boots." But deep down, I was worried. I may have gotten his truck stuck, and I may have exposed his trespassing, but if this man was bold enough to leave a threatening message with a knife, who knew what he'd try next? That weekend, I stayed up late, patrolling the land with Bear by my side and a flashlight in one hand. I didn't sleep much. I reinforced my fences. I even added motion lights to the eastern side. But then something even more disturbing happened. Sunday morning, I woke up and found tire tracks behind my barn. Not the usual kind from my tractor. These were fresh, narrow, from a car or small truck. They stopped right at the rear wall, and there, spray-painted in red, "Join the HOA or else." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a grudge anymore. This was a threat to force me into the very system I was legally not a part of. It was war. And I knew. If I didn't act fast, they'd find a way to push harder. What they didn't know was I had a few surprises of my own. And next time they stepped on my ranch, they'd wish they never did. The red spray paint still shimmered on the barn wall when Ellie arrived that Sunday afternoon. She was carrying her school bag, a box of cookies for Bear, and a worried look on her face. I hadn't told her about the latest stunt yet, but she knew something was wrong the second she stepped out of the car. "Dad, why are there tire marks behind the barn?" I gave her a tight smile. "We've got some unwanted visitors, sweetheart. But don't worry, I've got it handled." She wasn't satisfied with that answer. Ellie was the type of kid who picked up on everything. Even when she was 5, she could sense a lie quicker than a bloodhound. She followed me around the side of the barn and froze when she saw the message. "Is this from him?" she asked quietly. "Looks that way." "I thought the commissioner suspended him." "He did," I nodded, "but some men don't know how to take no for an answer." Ellie's fists clenched. "We have to fight back." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "We will, but smart, not reckless." I spent the next few hours painting over the graffiti and wiping away the tracks. I didn't want it to feel like whoever did this was winning. But something gnawed at the back of my mind. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was control. Hank and the HOA weren't just angry, they were threatened. And men like that don't stop until they feel powerful again. So I made a call. 2, actually. The first was to a friend of mine, Rick Mason. He's a retired Army engineer who now works freelance security setups. Cameras, drones, sensors, you name it, Rick can install it faster than a cat can climb a tree. The second call was to my lawyer. I told her everything. She promised to file a formal complaint with the county and have a restraining order drawn up if Hank came near my property again. Meanwhile, Rick arrived the next morning with a truck full of gadgets. Ellie helped him set up trail cams hidden in trees, motion-triggered lights, and a pair of small but powerful drones with night vision. He even installed a solar-powered gate alert that buzzed the main house anytime someone tried to enter without a code. This should catch everything short of a ghost. Rick grinned as he wiped sweat from his brow. "Good," I said, "because I think we're about to see a whole new level of stupid." I wasn't wrong. That Friday night, after Ellie had gone to bed and Bear was snoozing by the fire, I was sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee when the motion alarm pinged. Beezist. Eastgate breach. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out onto the porch, shotgun slung low across my back. Not to use, just to make it clear I wasn't playing games. Bear was already alert, his ears twitching. I clicked on the porch light and walked down the steps scanning the field. Nothing at first, but then I heard it, the slow crunch of gravel. And there, just beyond the fence, was a figure in a dark hoodie. He wasn't alone. 2 others stood behind him closer to the bushes. I couldn't see their faces, but they were moving deliberately. Trespassers, again. "Hey," I barked, "you're on private property." The figure didn't run. He just turned slowly and shined a flashlight straight at me, blinding me for a second. Then, clear as day, I heard the voice. "I warned you, Walker," Hank said. "You should have joined the HOA." Bear growled deep in his chest. I flipped the safety off my shotgun and pointed it downward, just to show I wasn't bluffing. "Leave, now." But Hank just laughed. "We're not on your land, technically." "That's a lie," I said, "and I've got cameras to prove it." "You think cameras will stop us?" he snarled. He stepped forward, and that's when the drone kicked in. A soft hum filled the air, and a red laser dot danced across Hank's chest. He froze and looked up. The drone hovered above him like a mechanical hawk, its lens zooming in, recording every movement. "What the?" one of his buddies said from behind the trees. Rick's voice crackled through the small speaker attached to the drone. "Smile. You're on county surveillance, gentlemen." Hank panicked. "Back, back," he shouted, retreating into the brush. I watched as the 3 of them stumbled through the trees, tripping and cursing. Within minutes, they were gone. I walked back to the house and downloaded the footage, but I didn't send it to the police yet. No, I had a better idea. The next morning, I took the footage straight to the Whispering Pines HOA office and requested a meeting with Denise. She didn't look happy to see me. "I'm very busy," she sighed. I dropped the flash drive onto her desk. "Not as busy as you're about to be." She plugged it in and watched. Her lips pressed tighter the longer the video played. By the time the drone zoomed in on Hank's face, her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment and fear. "You'll want to report this yourself," I said calmly, "or I'll be sending a copy to every resident of Whispering Pines, along with the police." "I didn't authorize this," she whispered. But you encouraged it, and now it's a crime. For once, Denise didn't have a sassy reply. That night I thought the worst had passed, but just as I was locking up the barn, I noticed something missing. The main power cord to my irrigation system had been cut clean, and the control box smashed in. It wasn't just vandalism anymore, they were hitting my livelihood. The sprinklers were destroyed. My crops, on the east field, were already starting to wilt. And to make it worse, a single spray-painted word sat on the control box in dripping black letters. Obey. That was the final straw. They could mess with my fences. They could leave me threats. But messing with my land? That meant war. Real war. And I wasn't about to lose. Not this time. What they didn't know was I had already begun preparing the trap. And the next time Hank or anyone from the HOA stepped onto my ranch again, they'd regret ever buying a house in Whispering Pines. The word obey stayed burned in my brain like a brand on a bull. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It was an order, a challenge, and they wanted to see if I'd break. But if there's one thing you learn out here in ranch life, it's this. Storms pass, cows spook, fences fall, but you never let another man claim your land. That night, after finding the irrigation system ruined, I didn't call the cops. No. This time I called Ellie. I told her to come home early after school the next day and help me. Not just to fix the damage, but to prepare. I had a plan. The next morning, I spent hours walking the eastern border of my ranch, inspecting every inch of fencing. That's the side that touched the HOA property, and clearly it had become the battlefield. I reinforced it with steel wiring, added noise-triggered lights hidden behind the bushes, and then went a step further. I prepped the old cattle trench. Back in the day, my grandfather dug a shallow trench system to control rainwater. It had been unused for years, but I cleared it, filled the base with wet clay from the creek, and smoothed it over with a thin layer of dry dirt. To the eye, it just looked like flat ground. But underneath, it was a mud pit. Ellie arrived that evening and I explained the setup. "Dad," she said slowly, "are you telling me you built a, let's just say," I cut in with a smile, "if a certain HOA truck finds its way back on my ranch, he'll be parking in a mud spa?" Ellie burst out laughing. "That's savage." "That's defense," I corrected. "We're not attacking anyone. We're protecting our home." And that night we waited. The trail cameras stayed silent. Bear didn't bark. It was quiet. Too quiet. Until Monday. I had just finished morning chores when my gate camera pinged. Motion detected. East entrance. I checked the feed. It was him, Hank. Same black HOA truck. Same smug expression. Except this time, he wasn't alone. He had a younger man with him, maybe in his 20s, holding a clipboard and walking like he owned the place. I watched as they walked past my fence line again, clearly ignoring the private property signs, and drove onto the same grassy area they always did. Only this time, they drove further in, right toward the fake patched trench. I grabbed my phone, ran to the porch, and started recording. And just like I planned, just like I hoped, the front tires dipped in first, then the back. The truck rocked forward, then the wheels spun and sank. Half the truck disappeared in seconds up to its axles, its undercarriage grinding into soft clay. Hank jumped out, yelling and cursing. The young guy panicked and ran back toward the fence line, slipping in mud and smacking face first into a tree branch. I didn't even try to hide my laughter. This time I didn't wait for them to call a tow. I called the sheriff myself. When Sheriff Daniels arrived 20 minutes later, he stepped out of his cruiser, looked at the scene, and shook his head like a disappointed teacher catching a student cheating again. "James," he sighed, "you and this man again?" "Not by my choice, Sheriff." Hank tried to play the victim again, shouting, "He trapped my vehicle. That's entrapment. I'm pressing charges." But Daniels cut him off. "You drove onto his land. Again. After a previous complaint. After you were suspended. After documented warnings." He turned to the younger guy. And you? I thought this was common access, the guy stuttered. I was told we were checking easement lines. Daniels raised a brow. You're a surveyor? I work with Whispering Pines Legal Affairs, he said quickly. They're trying to expand the HOA borders, I snapped. You what? I stepped forward. You're trying to steal more land? Not steal, just negotiate. On land you're trespassing, Daniels growled. Now the sheriff was angry too. I'm done with this. Hank, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing. Again, you were warned. James has every right to detain footage and press civil charges. We'll impound your truck and your little expansion plan. He spit in the dirt. Dead in the mud. Hank's face drained of color. The cuffs clicked on and Hank, for the first time, didn't fight it. He just stood there, defeated. They hauled him off, leaving the sunken truck behind. I watched the tow crew shake their heads in disbelief as they pulled the thing out of the trench with 2 rigs. The other man, HOA legal, drove off quietly, avoiding eye contact. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Because that evening, just after Ellie and I finished dinner, a sleek black luxury car pulled into my driveway. A man stepped out, dressed in a sharp suit and polished shoes. Good evening, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm Richard Lanes, Senior Legal Counsel for Whispering Pines. I didn't shake his hand. What do you want? I've come to offer a solution, he said, glancing around. The HOA is prepared to offer you a full membership package. No fees for 2 years. Access to all facilities. Plus, we're willing to discuss a generous compensation package if you allow limited access through your eastern field for a proposed expansion project. I blinked. You're offering me money to join the same HOA that just vandalized my land and sent a trespasser to jail? Well, Richard coughed. I think we can find a peaceful agreement, especially if we forget the unfortunate events. I took a slow step forward. You ever heard the phrase, put lipstick on a pig? He blinked. You're offering me poison in a pretty glass, and I'm not thirsty. I pointed to the gate. Get off my ranch now. He gave a stiff nod, adjusted his tie, and walked away without a word. But just as his car backed up, he rolled the window down and said something that chilled me to the bone. This land may be yours today, but in time all fences fall. Think about that. He drove off into the night, taillights glowing like 2 red eyes. I didn't sleep at all, because now I knew. The battle with Hank was only the beginning. The HOA wanted my land, and they were coming for it. I didn't tell Ellie what the man in the black car said, not because I wanted to hide the truth, but because I didn't want her to carry the same weight I now had pressing on my chest. That night, I sat in the living room alone, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring out the window. The wind blew through the trees like whispers in the dark, and every creak of the wood floor felt like a warning. This land may be yours today, but in time all fences fall. I'd heard threats before. I'd dealt with trespassers, wild animals, even drought. But this was different. This was cold, calculated, legal. The kind of danger that wears a suit, shakes your hand, and steals your home with a pen. The next morning, I found a letter nailed to my mailbox. Notice of Mandatory Annexation Review, Eastern Parcels, Whispering Pines, HOA. It had county stamps, legal language, and 3 signatures at the bottom. They were making their move. The letter claimed the HOA was petitioning the county for an annexation adjustment to extend their boundary around my land, and eventually through it. The language was slippery, full of loopholes and vague terms like community access, connective pathways, and zoned green expansion. But the goal was clear. They wanted to box me in, turn my ranch into a fenced-in island inside their HOA kingdom, sooner or later forcing me to sell, comply, or lose everything to legal fees and pressure. I drove straight to the county clerk's office and demanded to speak with someone. I was met by a polite, overworked assistant named Laura, who glanced at the paperwork and sighed. This isn't legal yet, she explained. It's a proposal. The HOA is lobbying for a review hearing next month. They want to convince the board that expanding the community boundary lines would increase property value and enhance neighborhood unity. I clenched my jaw. What about private property? Laura frowned. They can't take your land, not unless the county authorizes eminent domain, which is extremely rare in rural zones. But they can make your life difficult. Petition for restrictions. Cut off access points. Challenge water rights. It's dirty politics. I leaned on the counter. Has anything like this happened before? Not around here, she said, lowering her voice. But Whispering Pines. They've got money. Lawyers. They pressure quietly, behind the scenes, but people are starting to notice. That last sentence gave me a sliver of hope. I thanked her and left, but on the drive home that hope faded. Because when I got back to the ranch, Ellie was standing at the front gate holding another letter. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the bank. Notice mortgage review initiated. Request for income verification. Now my ranch was paid off. I owned every acre outright. But years ago I had taken a small home improvement loan to rebuild the barn after a storm. Nothing major. Yet somehow, the bank was reevaluating the loan due to increased property risk and potential rezoning. I called them immediately. The woman on the other end was polite, but unhelpful. We received concerns from community members regarding structural risk and potential land disputes, she said flatly. As a result, your account has been flagged for internal review. I knew what that meant. The HOA was trying to squeeze me from every side. County, bank, legal, neighbors. I wasn't just being bullied anymore. I was being targeted. That evening, Ellie sat beside me on the porch. The sun dipped below the trees, and Bear lay at our feet, watching the fence line. I don't get it, she whispered. Why would anyone go this far, just for land? I looked out at the pastures, the hills, the barn we built with our own hands. It's not just the land, I said. It's about power, control. Some people see anything outside their fence as a threat. They can't stand what they can't own. She was quiet for a moment. Then maybe it's time we push back. I looked at her. Not with traps, she added quickly. With truth. That gave me an idea. The next morning I made a flyer. Whispering Pines HOA is trying to annex my land. I'm not part of their HOA. I need your help. I printed 100 copies. Ellie and I walked house to house in the neighborhoods near the edge of the HOA, homes that weren't fully inside the Whispering Pines borders but were being courted to join. Some people didn't open the door, some didn't care, but many did, and some were angry, not at me but at the HOA. Turns out, I wasn't the only one they'd pushed. One man, Mr. Dawson, a retired firefighter, said they fined him for leaving his flag up overnight. Another lady, Maria, said they sent someone to inspect her backyard without asking, inside her fence. I didn't know they were going after your ranch too, she said. That's just wrong. By the end of the week, over 30 families had signed a petition we started. A few even offered to show up at the county hearing next month. But the HOA wasn't done. Late Friday night, as a thunderstorm rolled across the hills, I heard a loud bang outside. I ran to the porch with my flashlight, and my heart sank. The barn, our barn, was in flames. Smoke billowed through the rain. Lightning lit up the field in flashes. The fire spread fast, roaring against the storm as if it wanted to survive. Ellie ran out behind me screaming, "The animals!" Bear barked wildly, sprinting toward the barn. We followed close behind, kicking open the side doors and untying ropes as fast as we could. The cows stormed out, the horses too. But the back stall, the one holding Ellie's rescue goat Pepper, was blocked by a fallen beam. I didn't hesitate. I threw my shoulder into it, burning my arm in the process, and dragged it out of the way. Ellie scooped up Pepper, and we ran back into the rain just as part of the roof collapsed. We stood in the mud, coughing and soaked, watching the barn fall. Gone. Just like that. Sheriff Daniels showed up minutes later. He took photos, asked questions, then found something behind the hay storage that made his face go hard, a can of gasoline, half empty. "I'll have the fire marshal look into this," he said. But James, this wasn't lightning. I didn't need him to say it. I knew. This was intentional. This was war, and I was done playing nice. No more waiting. It was time I reminded Whispering Pines who really owned this land. The morning after the fire, the ranch felt hollow. The barn was a blackened skeleton. Smoke still curled up from the rubble like ghostly fingers. The scent of charred wood clung to everything. My clothes, my boots, my soul. Ellie was quiet. She sat on the porch steps, arms around Pepper the goat, her cheeks streaked with tears she didn't want me to see. I sat beside her without a word, watching the clouds crawl across the sky. Bear lay between us, unusually still, as if he too knew the ranch had been wounded. But underneath the silence, I was boiling. That fire wasn't just an attack on my land. It was an attack on my family, on my daughter. And something inside me shifted. I wasn't just going to fight back, I was going to win. I stood up and walked into the house, grabbed my phone, and dialed Rick Mason, my old army buddy who set up our security. "Rick," I said, "it's time." "You want to go loud?" he asked, already knowing. "Yes," I said. "No more warnings, no more waiting." Within hours, Rick showed up with a second truck loaded with new equipment. He brought extra cameras, solar spotlights, 2 backup drones, and even a camouflaged wildlife tower with a panoramic lens. We set it up in the tallest oak tree near the eastern border, where the HOA property pressed hardest. By sundown, the ranch looked like a small military base. Every inch covered, every corner watched. But that wasn't the real plan. That night, I drafted a detailed email. In it, I included every documented incident: trespassing, harassment, vandalism, illegal parking, the fake annexation letter, the mortgage interference, the threats, the knife on the gate, and now, the barn fire. I attached videos, photos, witness names. Then, I hit send. To every news outlet in the region, to the county board, to a few YouTubers I knew who covered local scandals, and to a real estate lawyer named Helen Kessler, a woman who made headlines last year after exposing a corrupt HOA board 2 counties over. Within 24 hours, the phone started ringing off the hook. Local news wanted interviews. Helen called and said, "I'll represent you pro bono. Let's end them." And the county commissioner? He personally scheduled an emergency meeting to review Whispering Pines' annexation request. The tide was turning. But the HOA didn't know it yet. That weekend, Ellie and I stood at the edge of the pasture, repairing a broken section of fence. She looked up at me, sweaty and tired but hopeful. "Dad, do you think they'll ever stop?" I leaned on my post hammer. "They'll stop when they realize we're not afraid, and when everyone else sees them for what they are." As if summoned by fate, a shiny black SUV rolled up to the HOA side of the property. Out stepped Denise, the HOA board president, with her usual fake smile. But this time she wasn't alone. 3 other HOA members followed, holding clipboards and wearing smug expressions. She waved at me across the fence. "James, we'd like to discuss a compromise." I didn't respond. She kept walking until she was just on the edge of my boundary line. "We realize things got out of hand," she said sweetly. "The fire was tragic, really, but it doesn't have to be a war." "Oh, it's already a war," I said flatly. "You started it. I'm just defending my home." She smirked. "Then let's talk numbers. The HOA is prepared to offer you a generous buyout, full market value and plus 50%. I laughed, loud. "You think this is about money?" "Everyone has a price, James," she said coolly. "Why keep fighting when you could walk away richer and—" I cut her off. "Lady, I didn't build this ranch for a paycheck. I built it for peace, for legacy, for my daughter." I took a slow step forward. and I'm not going anywhere." She exhaled sharply. "You'll regret this." Then she turned to walk away. But before she reached the SUV, one of my new drone cameras buzzed down from the sky and hovered right above their heads. A red light blinked as it recorded them, the lens aimed directly at Denise. She looked up, startled. I called out calmly, "Smile for the documentary. It's called How the HOA Tried to Steal a Ranch and Got Burned Instead." She got into her car without another word. That night, the news segment aired. It was explosive. A small-town rancher being harassed by a power-hungry HOA. Hidden cameras, vandalism, a barn fire, legal threats. It was the perfect storm, and it blew up fast. By morning, it was all over social media. And Stand with the Ranch was trending in the region. People were furious. Former Whispering Pines residents came forward with their own stories. A former board member even admitted anonymously that they had talked about choking out my ranch to expand the HOA. The county commissioner issued a statement. The annexation proposal by Whispering Pines HOA has been denied. An investigation is now underway. And then came the real punch. The bank? They called and apologized. Said my mortgage review had been reversed due to outside pressure being flagged inappropriately. But it wasn't over. Because 2 days later, Sheriff Daniels called me. "You're going to want to see this," he said. When I arrived at the sheriff's office, he had something waiting. Security footage, captured by my own tower camera, from the night of the barn fire. It was grainy, hard to see in the rain, but the figure was unmistakable. Hank, cloaked in a poncho, hood up. But his limp gave him away. He'd twisted his ankle falling into the trench weeks earlier. He was holding a can of gasoline, clear as day. Sheriff Daniels paused the video. "With this, we can press arson charges." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I nodded. "Do it." Daniels clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You did good, James. Most folks wouldn't have stood their ground." I gave a tired smile. Most folks haven't had their barn burned down. Later that night, as Ellie and I sat by the campfire with Bear at our feet and Pepper curled beside her, she said something that made my chest swell. "Dad, even if they had offered $1 million, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else." I looked out over the dark fields, the stars above, the smoke from the fire dancing into the night. "They tried everything to take this place from us," I said quietly. "But they forgot one thing." Ellie looked up. "What's that?" I leaned back and stared at the stars. "You don't beat a rancher with papers and lies." I paused, smiled. "You beat him with fire, and he still comes out stronger." But I knew deep down, Hank wasn't done. Not yet. Because that night, as the wind howled and the fire crackled low, I found something again. A shadow at the far fence line. Watching. The shadow stood still for nearly 30 seconds. I didn't move. Neither did Bear. His body stiffened, ears perked forward, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. I squinted through the firelight and rising smoke, barely making out the figure's outline against the fence. Tall, broad, familiar. And then, just like that, it was gone. No footsteps, no rustling, just vanished. But I knew who it was. Even after being suspended, arrested, and exposed, Hank Bradford was still watching, still lurking, still waiting for the right moment to strike. He had lost everything, his position, his reputation, his truck, and now, his freedom was hanging by a thread. Desperate men don't walk away quietly. The next morning, I checked every camera. Nothing clear, no license plates, no trail. But the gate sensor had triggered, twice, at 2:47 a.m. Whoever it was, they were smart. They didn't enter, just paced the edge, testing boundaries, watching patterns, looking for weakness. I wasn't going to give them one. By now, news coverage had turned national. Whispers of HOA overreach, Property rights violations and small-town justice were making waves across the country. Emails poured in, messages of support, donations, supplies. One guy even offered to send a construction crew to rebuild the barn for free, just because he believed in what we were standing for. But support wasn't all we received. 3 anonymous letters showed up in our mailbox within 2 days. No names, no return addresses, just scribbled threats. You're not safe. Back down before something worse happens. You're a virus, the HOA will fix that. Ellie found the last one and her hands trembled as she read it aloud. Dad, we should call the sheriff again. And we did. Daniels came right away, took the letters, and promised to increase patrols near our land. But even he looked tired, worn. James, he said, rubbing his eyes. You sure you want to keep pushing this? You've already won. The HOA's in hot water. Hank's going to jail. Maybe it's time to lay low. I shook my head. This was never about just winning, Sheriff. It's about warning them. Warning others. If I stop now, the next guy with a ranch and a dream will be buried under HOA bylaws and legal tricks. He gave a slow nod. You're right, but watch your back. Cornered men lash out. Later that day, as I walked the backfield with Ellie and Bear, we found something that stopped us cold. A deer, dead. Its neck twisted unnaturally. But what chilled us wasn't the deer. It was what was tied to its leg. A small plastic tag. On it was written, "This is what happens when fences fall." That night, I barely slept. I set up floodlights on every corner, armed the new motion sensors. Bear stayed close, growling at every cricket. At 3:08 a.m., the sensor went off again. This time I ran outside with a flashlight and my old hunting rifle slung on my shoulder, not to fire, just to warn. And that's when I saw them, 3 men, in hoodies, moving low along the east fence. One had bolt cutters, another carried a can of something, likely gasoline, and the third was Hank. Even in the dark, I could see that wild, angry expression on his face. He saw me. I saw him. And without thinking, I stepped into the spotlight, raised the rifle slightly, not aimed, and shouted, "This is your final warning. I have cameras, I have proof. One more step and you'll be spending the rest of your life behind bars." They froze. Then, all at once, ran. But they didn't get far. Blue lights flashed across the field as Daniel's cruiser and 2 backup cars screeched onto the dirt road. Sirens blared, commands echoed. On the ground, now. The men dropped fast. Except Hank. He kept running, straight toward the ditch. Bear barked, chasing alongside me as I gave chase. Hank tried to leap over the mud trench I'd rebuilt 2 days earlier, but his foot slipped. He landed flat in the sludge, face first, with a sickening squelch. Sheriff Daniels cuffed him right there, in the same mud where I had once dragged his truck. Only this time he wasn't getting out. As the officers pulled him up, soaked and defeated, he turned toward me with fury in his eyes. This was my community, he spat. I kept it safe. I protected it. I stepped forward, calm and sure. No, Hank, you tried to own it. You forgot the land doesn't belong to a title or a badge or a set of bylaws. It belongs to those who respect it. He didn't say another word. They drove him away. And this time, it was over. The HOA board collapsed within a week. Denise resigned after leaked emails revealed her knowledge of Hank's actions and her encouragement. The county issued a cease and desist order on any further HOA expansion. Whispering Pine's reputation tanked. Homeowners revolted. New board members were elected, ones who wanted peace and boundaries, not power. The barn was rebuilt with donated lumber, and the new one was twice as strong. Ellie painted a sign above the door, "Stand your ground," and below it smaller, "Walker Ranch, Eastern 2013, never for sale." As for Bear, he got a brand new collar, a year's supply of biscuits, and his face made it on the local news as the dog who defended a ranch. Ellie, she started writing a blog about the whole ordeal, called it Fence Line Diaries. It went viral. And me? I sit on my porch every evening now, watching the sun dip behind the trees, the horses grazing peacefully again. Sometimes people drive by slowly, just to get a glimpse of the ranch that stood up to the HOA. And every now and then, someone knocks on my door, not to threaten me, but to thank me. Because I didn't just protect my land. I proved that sometimes standing alone is better than bowing in a crowd. And when a man has truth, grit, and just enough mud, even the strongest HOA truck doesn't stand a chance.